We'll acknowledge Congressman Khazar, you all know him, and I'm going to turn to Dr. Saira Bilal, who will introduce him.
Good afternoon, honorable members of Congress, legislative staff members, and ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. Saira Bilal, and I'm representing First Pakistan Global. I would like to welcome you all today to this congressional briefing, which is held by and hosted by Congressman Greg Khazar. I would like to express my deepest and sincerest gratitude for you being the holder of democracy, supporting democracy, human rights across the globe, including Pakistan. Congressman Greg Khazar has spearheaded several congressional letters, including the letter to President Biden and Secretary of State, and he has been a huge supporter of Pakistani diaspora efforts towards restoring democracy to Pakistan. Today, we will be discussing the Islamabad message, and we hope to achieve and enlighten people about what is happening in Pakistan, the ongoing crisis, the military destabilizing the country, and dismantling of the institutions. We'll also hope to address potential sanctions against the individuals who were responsible for Islamabad massacre. Thank you very much, Congressman Greg Khazar. Everybody, please give a huge welcome.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and I'm so grateful to those of you who have traveled from far and wide to be able to be here today to talk about the events and the killing on November 26th and 27th, talk about issues of peace and democracy both in Pakistan and across the world. And I think it's so important for the Pakistani American community to be gathered and organizing to promote peace and human rights, as you said, for everyone. I'm Greg Khazar. I'm proud to represent the heart of Texas, stretching from San Antonio to Austin, Texas. And while I really feel when I came into office focusing on issues of domestic policy, it's so clear that the way that the United States treats our partners and neighbors across the world impacts our everyday lives here in the United States. And I came in with
on November 26th, Pakistan saw the most brutal crackdown on thousands pro-democracy protesters.
And the United States has a history, an unfortunate history, and a short-sighted history of oftentimes looking at its short-sighted military interests, thinking of military alliances first and democracy in places like Latin America second. And what we saw happen in Latin America, and what connected me so much to the issues happening right now in Pakistan, is how the United States, sometimes during the Cold War, because it put its thinking about US and Russia first, supported dictatorships, supported authoritarianism, and in fact, supported the toppling of democracy in places in Latin America that took generations to recover. It did not serve the United States or people in America's own interest relative to the Cold War. It did not serve the interests of everyday people in Latin America. And in fact, destabilizing those democracies hurt our own democracy, hurt our own ability to work across the world for global prosperity, hurt our own ability to tackle the shared challenge of the climate crisis. It ended up not helping anyone. And similarly, as I've asked questions about what has happened here in Pakistan in recent years, I can see how the status quo of militaries supporting militaries first and not asking about democracy ever ends up actually hurting our own American people. I leave to the people of Pakistan the question of who to elect, how to run your own politics, whether your leaders agree with me or not. I know that the Congressman, we're both from Texas. We have very different ideas, but at the end of the day, the question isn't whether somebody in Pakistan agrees with Mr. Pfluger's ideas or agrees with mine. The question is, can the people in Pakistan choose their own path, choose their own future? And can they choose that future and be able to protest and demonstrate and vote for whomever they like without fear of repression, and even more importantly, in my seat as the United States for Congress, without fear of repression that is supported in part by our own dollars. And so my first action as it related to questions of U.S. and Pakistan relations was in 2023, which when I led on a letter with Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, asking that we do a review of the legality of United States military assistance in Pakistan, because we have a law. believe this law should be applied anymore to our best friends versus our allies versus anyone else. There is just simply a law that says that U.S. military assistance does come with a condition. And that condition is support of human rights and democracy, because it is U.S. taxpayer dollars that should be going to supporting peace and security, not to hurting our own values and oppressing anyone of any political party, whether I agree with that political party. We then followed up in 2024 with another directive and question to Secretary Blinken. I did that work with Congresswoman Susan Wild, who is just an excellent member of Congress, expressing our concern about all of the reports of rigging in the elections. Again, we want to make sure that our role on the international stage is to make sure that we aren't saying, well, if somebody that the military is aligned with and the election is rigged, we're not going to say anything. If there's somebody that we're not aligned with and there's rigging, we are going to say something. No, the United States wants to have credibility around the world. Then we need to call a fair election, whether we agree with the results or not. An unfair election, an unfair one, whether we like the results or not. Of a country with so many people, with such a history, with such ties back to the United States, it's so important for us to be consistent. And so I and other members of Congress are willing to hold leaders of our own party to that standard of being consistent, saying we want free and fair elections, and we want all of our partners and allies to be held to that basic standard. And then here in October of 2024, with Congressman Rick McGovern and Congresswoman Summer Lee, alongside 62 other members of Congress, we asked the Biden administration to center human rights in our U.S. policy towards Pakistan, asking for the release of political prisoners, including Imran Khan.
Thank you to all of you for being here. Thank you, Mr. Nani and Congressman Rick for organizing this, Congressman. Thank you, Congressman Jim McGovern. I just heard the comment. Thank you so much for it. And Congressman Hoover, who just left after making this comment. I have a prepared testimony. I was asked to basically wind a shortage of time, so I quickly return to my prepared points. For context, it's important to emphasize that I have worked with top media networks, including the state broadcaster, as television anchor, political analyst and editor since 2005. I have written extensively on Pakistani politics and have been founder editor of print and online publications. Before media, I worked for more than 10 years with Red Government of Pakistan. These roles have provided me meaningful access to the top civil military, decision makers, politicians, legislators, and judiciary of Pakistan. Honorable Congressman, while Pakistan has been defined as a state moving from crisis to crisis since its inception, the Islamabad massacre of November 2024, in which hundreds of people were shot, literally at the gates of its Parliament and Supreme Court, and bodies made to disappear, like the Banana Massacre in Colombia of 1928, was unprecedented, even in Pakistan's total history. This represents a clear and present danger for U.S. interests in South and Central Asia, and the growing instability, Congressman, is increasing immigration pressures towards Europe via Mediterranean. Asylum applications are also piling up in the U.S. borders from Pakistan. Honorable Congressman and fellow gentlemen, but we have not reached this dangerous situation overnight. Pakistan, a nation of almost 250 million, fifth largest in the world after China, India, China, United States, and Indonesia, second largest Muslim nation, and the only Muslim country with nuclear weapons, with almost 1 million trained men in uniform in arms, is increasingly on boil since a military-led regime change operation in April 2022 against the government of Prime Minister Imran Khan. Since then, country with more than 65% under the age of 35, facing an economic meltdown, water, food, and energy shortages, is being run by a military with growing brutality and in total disregard of United Nations and international human rights conventions. Since April 2022, while courts have been made to collapse, more than 20,000 men and women have been arrested, hundreds have been tortured, journalists, lawyers, human rights activists, and poets have been abducted, forced to go underground or seek protection in Western democracies like myself. I left when a dear colleague and outspoken critic of military, Arshad Sharif, was chased and murdered in Kenya on 23rd October 2022. 10 days later, An assassin almost murdered Imran Khan, the former prime minister and country's most popular leader. But both criminal acts, Congressman, to this day have not been properly investigated. Biden administration, for reasons not understood, completely ignored the crisis developing in Pakistan. Attention was repeatedly drawn by Pakistani American community to brutal suppression of opposition, gross human rights violations, silencing of media, muzzling of courts, and internet shutdowns. But Biden administration kept on dodging the questions and thus tacitly encouraged the Pakistani military to continue with its reign of terror. Congressman, in November 2023, I remind you, Representatives Brett Kassar and Ilhan Omar wrote to Secretary Blinken to review if United States security assistance is contributing to human rights violations. And on 28 February 2024, after elections were massively rigged in Pakistan by the military, 31 congressmen led by Representatives Brett Kassar and Susan Wyatt wrote to Secretary Blinken to withhold recognition of an apparently illegitimate government till a transparent and credible investigation is conducted into alleged election interference and irregularities. In June 2024, in an unprecedented move, United States Congress and House Resolution 901 affirmed its support for democracy and demanded investigation into election irregularities and interference by the military. And in October 2024, 4 weeks before the Islamabad massacre, Representatives Brett Kassar, Jim McGovern, yourself, and Congresswoman Summer Lee again led 61 congressmen asking Biden administration to emphasize human rights and rule of law in its policy towards Pakistan, and demanded the release of all political prisoners, including the former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Congressmen, all unfortunately fell on deaf ears. Washington ignored the growing crisis, including increasing reports of transnational repression, filing of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. These are hundreds of instances of intimidation and violence against relatives, families, and associates of Pakistani Americans in Pakistan by the military regime for the views expressed within the US for reaching out to the congressmen and for the comments on Twitter, which is, by the way, blocked in Pakistan since 17 February 2024. Congressman, Islamabad massacre was thus the culmination of growing public outrage and helplessness against rigged elections, destruction of the court system, and silence of the international community led by Washington. It was in these circumstances that more than 100,000 protesters marched into capital Islamabad to demand release of political prisoners, restoration of the Supreme Court, and respect for the stolen mandate in February election. Instead of negotiating with peaceful, unarmed protesters, a military operation was conducted in the middle of the night. No one knows how many were really killed, as dead bodies were made to disappear, just like the Banana Massacre of 1928 in Colombia. I hope Ryan Grimm of Dropsite, who I see here, who did an investigative story, will provide more details about this massacre. Congressman, in my humble opinion, unless the US Congress impresses upon the incoming Trump administration to develop a focus on Pakistan through special envoys and demand person-specific sanctions against the officers of the military regime and police responsible for the massacre, human rights violations, instability and chaos will continue to grow in Pakistan, increasing risk for its neighbors and the United States' interest in the region. Thank you.
Analysis and for that context. Next, we will turn to Mr. Ryan Grimm, who is a journalist and co-founder of Dropsite News, which incidentally is also banned in Pakistan, and you will very soon find out why. He will share a report on how the military leadership planned the attack on unsuspecting protesters and how they covered it up. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thank you. Thank you. And I know that in Pakistan, VPNs are very popular, so the ban on the drop site is only so effective, so it still gets out there. What I'm going to do is read a decent amount of the article into the record here, just so that so it exists here. I don't really think it's my place anyway to tell people in Pakistan, how they ought to run their internal affairs. That's for Pakistanis to determine. What I can do is reveal what information I can with my colleagues in a journalistic capacity, and then I can encourage my government to try to not make things worse. But beyond that, leave that to people who are in Pakistan or who have a connection to Pakistan. So let me read the story that my colleague Murtaza and I are saying. I'll skip over some of the journalistic filler, but we can get to the the important parts. The headline was leaked information reveals Pakistan Army planned brutal crackdown on protests, including live fire and subsequent cover-up. The Pakistan Army planned to carry out a lethal crackdown on supporters of the imprisoned former Prime Minister Imran Khan in November, according to a source inside the Pakistan Army, confirmed by a second source with knowledge of the planning. The revelations of the government's multi-stage plan, which included a communications blackout, snipers, tear gas armed soldiers, strategic blockades in the heart of Islamabad, and the use of live ammunition, shows the level of alarm Pakistan's military government feels about supporters of Khan's PTI. Yet at the same time, the chilling details revealed by the source, we are providing due to the likelihood of reprisal. Along with the government's repeated denials of the details of its operation, suggests it remains confident in its ability to crush dissent and break the back of the pro-PTI movement. A second source with knowledge of the planning independently confirmed the outlines of the Army sources' information.
I could just pause. He will go on. There's a lot here.
That covers it.
No, there's a lot to cover, and I'm sure the Congressman has other meetings to attend to. So thank you so much for coming. Congressman Frank Cologne, we really appreciate you being here and to express your views on democracy and human rights in Pakistan. He's our congressman from New Jersey.
Oh, well, thank you. And I don't really have a lot to say, but and you probably heard it from some of the others, but let me just comment a little bit. I think some of you may or may not that I have I don't want to say large, but I'll call it a large Pakistani American community in my district which is in the central part of New Jersey, near New Brunswick, where Rutgers University is. We have a number of mosques, and I try to frequent them when I can, particularly on the religious holidays. But I just wanted to say, I value democracy in general, and I know that there have been times in the history of Pakistan when we haven't had a complete democracy, but I still think of it as a very vibrant democracy, and that the people deserve to be able to have fair elections and elect leaders who are going to be responsive to them, which I think is only the case when you have a democracy. If you have an authoritarian regime or a military regime, they're never going to be responsive to the average person, the way the democratic elected leader is. So when I heard from some of my constituents about the election in February of 2024 and what happened, it was very upsetting to me. Clearly, it's been designated by the State Department as a free and fair election. And of course, there's been the crackdown since then on the supporters of the Prime Minister who ran in that election. He wasn't allowed to, really, because it wasn't fair. And that's just another indication of the military leaders, if you will, taking a hard line and making it more difficult for people to exercise their right to vote or freedom of speech. We passed a resolution in the House. I think I have the number here. I'm sure I'll familiar with it. And basically expressing our desire that Pakistan go back to the democratic process and the human rights violations will not continue. And I just think the United States has an obligation, as does this Congress, to continue to speak out and support those like yourselves that believe in free and fair elections and free speech in Pakistan and throughout the world. I know that what's the term realpolitik, there are a lot of Americans or even American leaders I'm going to mention who think the U.S. policy should be driven by what I call realpolitik. What's best in our economic interests, what's best in our security interests. But I've always felt that whether it's our economic interests or our security interests, that democracy is always more likely to lead to a government that's more friendly and more helpful to us, both from a national security point of view and an economic point of view. So I don't separate the two. Democratic rights are crucial, and they go along with economic freedoms, national security concerns at the same time. So I'll just continue to be out there speaking out against what's happening and advocating for a free and fair elections and a democratic Pakistan.
I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for Thank you so much for your rights get sacrificed on the altar of strategic interests. So thank you so much for saying that. Strengthening human rights regimes actually end up creating more stability, and then that acts in our national security interest as well. So thank you very much for your words.
I'll say it.
We would love for you to say thank you. And Ryan, I'm so sorry. We'd like to work with you.
I'll read a little bit.
Yes.
What stage to here? Okay. So I was reading from our article that was published, about the November massacre, in which do we know how many? Do we know yet how many?
That's,
Yeah,
Wikipedia has confirmed about 13 or 14, but the hundreds of people are missing.
right. And who may be detained, and maybe we'll hear from them a year from now when they're released, or maybe they're dead.
Presumed dead.
Presumed, you see, there are eyewitnesses that also tell that how the dead bodies were taken away. And the dead bodies that have been recovered are the dead bodies of people who were shot between 4 p.m. and 9 and 10 p.m. by the snipers. The actual military operation took place after 11 p.m. So you haven't found any dead body from the actual military operation. That's what I call is another massacre.
So I'll continue to read briefly from the article. According to the source who provided substantial evidence to confirm the allegation, and just to be clear for people who are familiar with our reporting, we are often criticized by Pakistan's government for not publishing the documents that are leaked to us. But the reason we don't do that should be fairly obvious, that the risk to the people who leak those documents, because it's existential. It would be fatal if they were exposed. And so any documents that we publish would include breadcrumbs to get back to the original source. So according to the source, who provided substantial evidence to confirm the allegation, the operation was planned on the morning of November 25th at the Military Operations Directorate of the Pakistan Army under the direction of General Asim Munir, Pakistan's powerful chief of army staff. Under the plan, Jinnah Avenue, the main road in front of Chalk, would be encircled with stacks of shipping containers serving as a barricade. Snipers from Pakistan Army Special Services Group were deployed across rooftops, while paramilitary rangers carrying assault rifles patrolled the roadside alongside police armed with tear gas and shells. To execute the plan, the military employed a multi-pronged approach. The first phase was to sow chaos and fear. Lights along Jinnah Avenue were extinguished in the that happening, plunging the area into darkness. At the same time, signals intelligence teams from Pakistan's inter-services intelligence agencies jammed communications networks, which people also reported independently, effectively cutting off the protesters' ability to communicate with each other in the outside world. The blackout was designed to disorient and demoralize the protesters. As confusion gripped the crowd, the second phase of the operation swung into action. The army gave the order to fire tear gas from multiple directions, and the choking fumes sent panicked protesters fleeing. This was the prelude to the main assault. What followed next, a barrage of live ammunition, including heavy assault rifle fire, directed indiscriminately at the fleeing crowds. Snipers positioned strategically on rooftops took aim at those being hostile or threatening. The final phase of the operation involved a swift and thorough cleanup. As soon as the firing ceased, ISI units were dispatched to Jinnah Avenue to remove all traces of the violence. This included removing bodies, shell casings, and any other evidence that could contradict the government's narrative of peaceful dispersal.